My name is Breanna Waldrup. I'm a speech-language pathologist specializing in childhood apraxia of speech and a program director of child apraxia treatment here at the Once Upon a Time Foundation. I'm happy to be presenting about literacy instruction for children with complex communication needs as part of a webinar series that the Once Upon a Time Foundation is producing in collaboration with the SATB2 Gene Foundation. So what are complex communication needs? Generally, when we say an individual has complex communication needs, we're referencing that the individual does not communicate only through speech. So they're using other forms of communication, or AAC, augmentative and alternative communication, which might include things like sign language, pictures, or perhaps a speech-generating device. The big thing and big point that I want us to take away from this webinar is that we don't want to assume that because a child or individual has complex communication needs, that that child or individual cannot learn to read. So sometimes the faulty assumption is made that because an individual or child is not talking, that child is not able to learn to read. So that's what we're going to discuss, is how we can teach our children with complex communication needs how to read. Effective reading instruction for children with complex communication needs includes the same literacy building blocks as children who speak to communicate. But we do make some modifications in how the children demonstrate the acquisition of those reading skills. So the important literacy building blocks that we're going to discuss briefly are phonological awareness, sound letter correspondence, and vocabulary. Phonological awareness is the understanding that words are made of sounds and the ability to identify and manipulate sounds and words. There are a number of phonological awareness skills. For example, one is segmenting, and that's where we segment or break sounds apart in words. So if we have the word cat, that we're able to then break it into its component sounds, k, at. Another skill is blending, which is kind of the opposite of being able to put sounds together into words. So taking the sounds k, at, and being able to blend them together into the word cat. Those are just a couple of examples of some phonological awareness skills. There are a number of other ones, but they're very important for learning to read. Another important literacy building block is sound letter correspondences. So the understanding that letters represent sounds and words, and knowing the correspondence between each sound and letter, so that when we see the letter M, we know that it says mm. When we're working on sound letter correspondences, we definitely want to focus on the sounds, not the names of the letters, because that's the skill that's really important for reading. So when we're reading and sounding out words, we don't use the names of the letters, we use the sounds. So when we're working on this skill with children learning to read, we really want to focus on the sound the letter makes rather than its name. Another important component for literacy is vocabulary. So understanding what words mean and having a robust vocabulary. When children are learning to read, if the word that they're reading is in their vocabulary, it definitely makes it easier. So when we're reading to children, that can be a great time to really build vocabulary. So when we're reading to children, we can illustrate or define words and help them really build that vocabulary. But when children are then learning to read, when they sound out a word, we want that word to already be in their vocabulary so that they can immediately recognize it. It just makes it a little easier. If they sound out the word and it's not a word that they know, then it just makes it harder for them to know if that word was right or not. It's much easier if they sound it out and then they're like, at, cat, and they immediately, oh yeah, cat, okay, I know that word. And immediately have that meaning and understanding of what they've read. So we know that a structured, evidence-based reading approach is best for most children, but we also know that it needs to be individualized to the child. So for children with complex communication needs, a very important way to modify a structured reading approach is to make sure that we're not requiring speech. So speech is not required. Many children learn to read aloud, but for children with complex communication needs, that won't be the case. We won't require them to produce the sounds and words when they're learning to read. We will encourage them to use the speech they have, but we'll also encourage them to use their AAC to demonstrate the skills that they're learning. And we're really going to focus on teaching skills receptively and then assessing for those skills receptively. I'm going to share some resources. There are some great videos of a researcher at Penn State named Janice Light working with a number of different children with complex communication needs on different reading skills. And I really encourage you to visit the website and view some of those videos because it's a really powerful example of how this can be done. But for example, if we're working on sound letter correspondences with a child with complex communication needs, and so we're not asking the child to produce sounds. So we've been teaching, we've shown them the letter T, and we've talked about how that letter says T, and we've shown them the letter M, and we've talked about how that one says M, and we think that they're starting to understand this, then we might show them different letter cards and say, okay, show me which letter says M. And then the child can touch the letter M, or maybe they use their eye gaze to indicate. But in some way, they're telling us, or again, maybe their AAC, that they understand that corresponds to the letter M. So that's one way in which, again, we've taught it receptively. We can assess it receptively to see if the child's learning it, but we're not requiring them to make the sound. Another example might be if you're working on the skill of blending, that you have a variety of pictures out. And again, you've been teaching this. You want to see how the child's doing with acquiring the skill. And so you might say, okay, show me which picture is the word k, act. And again, these might just be pictures where they are then putting those sounds together in their brain to form the word cat and finding the picture of the cat. It could also be the written word as well, depending on where they are in their skills. So that's another example of how we might be kind of assessing receptively, but the child's not actually needing to produce the word cat to show us that they're learning that skill. An important way to modify our reading instruction too is to make sure we're using scaffolding. Scaffolding is frequently used in therapy and can be really helpful for reading instruction as well. Scaffolding refers to providing as much support as is needed to help a child learn and demonstrate a skill. So we provide as much help as they need to learn the skill, and then as they progress, we gradually fade how much we're assisting them so they become more and more independent. So we provide as much help as we need for success, then as they master and progress, we fade until they become independent with that skill. So that was just a brief overview of ways that we might help children with complex communication needs to learn to read. And again, overall, I want us to remember to not assume that a child's ability to speak correlates to their ability to read. And I want to provide some resources for you to gain more information on this topic. So I already referenced the website on Penn State's website and AAC Literacy. And again, there are a variety of videos and detailed information about different reading skills and how to teach children with complex communication needs to read. Another great resource is Rhett University, rhettuniversity.org. Their webpage is designed specifically for girls with Rett syndrome who have complex communication needs, but it can certainly be used with other children with complex communication needs. They have a variety of online courses for parents, teachers, and therapists. They also have free home learning resources and video lessons. And they cover a variety of topics, not just reading instruction, but other skills as well. And of course, you have our website, childapraxiatreatment.org, where we provide information about reading instruction, particularly for children with childhood apraxia of speech, and also link to some of these other resources. I hope that you found this information helpful, and if there's any other information that we can provide, please let us know.